Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Process Podcast.
Mr. Carmichael.
Good evening, Mr. Edward.
Evening?
Yeah, well, 20 past 4.
Nah,
We're coming.
I'd class
close.
that as afternoon.
It's late afternoon.
Evening for me, I think once it passes
Six.
sixes. Yeah,
agreed.
six.
Agreed.
How you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I'm good,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm really looking forward to this podcast.
Yeah.
We haven't done a Q&A in a while.
I think the last time I was on this podcast was a
A
Q&A.
Q&A?
So a couple of months ago.
Yeah, I always really like these ones.
Yeah, they're good.
A chance to geek out, not too much thought, and yeah. We put some questions out to we put a question out to our followers on Instagram, and these were some of the questions that we had come back. We had both. I don't know if you asked about mental health.
I didn't.
No.
You sent me a message, but it kind of went over my head.
You completely didn't read it properly.
I didn't read it properly.
That's all
no.
good.
Yeah.
But I actually did say, like, if there's anything in particular related to mental health, we'd love to dig into it. And because it is Mental Health Month.
Yeah.
But we actually I think we both agree on this, is that I love the concept of Mental Health Month, but I also don't want to just jump onto the bandwagon and just start talking about mental health because it's Mental Health Month. I do actually think we talk about mental health a lot. We just don't perhaps coin the term mental health.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We do actually do quite a lot of things throughout the year, and even on this podcast, we're constantly talking about the importance of mental health, right? So
it's interesting. I find when I talk about mental health, or even say those two words, it either attracts people or it deters people. There's, I think, a population of people who perhaps are going through their own journeys who've used the word or are familiar with the language around mental health, who are, gravitate towards it and want to hear what you have to say. And there's a big population of people who still thinks it's kind of a bit woo-woo, left field, kind of like this spiritual thing that doesn't align with them. So I've kind of like gravitated away from using the words too much, and just kind of talked about thoughts, feelings, emotions, past experiences, what goes on in your mind, which I guess is all kind of the same thing.
I mean, I think just for me, like growing up, like hearing the word mental health, there was kind of like a stigma to it. Like it was kind of like taboo to start talking about mental health. It was like, especially where I'm from in like Scotland, the UK, Glasgow, that didn't get talked about when I was younger growing up. So you hear the word mental health, it's kind of like, oh, what's he going to say? Is there something wrong?
Yes.
You know what I mean? There's always that something attached to it. There's actually something wrong, when essentially we're just talking about the health of the mind, just like we talk about fitness of the body all the time, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we have a mix of questions. We got some related to mental health. We got some we always get some really good questions around training, coaching, programming, that kind of stuff. So we've got some of those mixed in here. We've got some quick fire questions that we're going to conclude the episode with.
Are they going to be quick fire?
They probably won't be.
That's the question.
I mean, are they ever quick fire?
They're
on this
definitely not.
podcast?
We do try hard, but
we'll try.
Yeah.
Quicker fire.
Quicker.
So should we dig in?
Let's go.
Question 1. How are you preparing for Hyrox? So we're both preparing for Hyrox right now.
We are.
The current date is the 12th of September. Is it September?
October.
It's October.
Yeah, it's
I'm
already
so
October.
bad with that.
Yeah.
It's 12th of October. We've got 22nd of November. Hyrox is coming.
19th.
Oh, is it?
It's the weekend of the 19th, mate. You're all over the
my
place.
mind's still on holiday. Okay, 19th and 20th of November is Hyrox. It's coming to Hong Kong for the very first time. For those who don't know, it is a race. It's standardized no matter where you go and when you do it. It is a total of 8 kilometers of running. The format is you start with a 1K run, then you'll do a station of something, another 1K run, another station of something, and then you basically continue to do 8 different rounds of 1 kilometers of running mixed in with a different movement. Those movements are rowing, skiing, pulling a sled, pushing a sled, burpee broad jumps, farmer's carries, walking lunges, and warballs. Nailed that. And we are at the coastal fitness community here in Hong Kong. We kind of reached out to our community, said, would anyone like to do this? We had a massive response. We have about 40 people, up to 40 people signed up for the race.
I think it's pretty impressive how many people we've actually got signed up.
Yeah.
Because initially when we put it out, everyone's like, yeah, we're going to do it. And like we started off like training at tracks and stuff, and we had like 40 to 50 people turn up. And we were saying, oh, there's probably going to be a big drop off when we get like halfway. But if anything, we've got even more people, so it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and it's really, the sessions are so much fun.
Yeah, they're
right
good
now.
fun. Yeah, they're good fun.
Okay, so the question is, how are you preparing for Hyrox? I think we should talk about what we're both doing. What we decided as a coaching team, when we looked at everyone who signed up to Hyrox within Coastal was either doing individual coaching with us or was a part of our Live, Perform, Compete program. And we had some people part of our Train for Life 45-minute program as well. And when we looked at the population, the one thing we all identified was that as a group, we haven't done much running. We have a bunch of pretty strong individuals with good skills on the movements that were required, but they hadn't accumulated. Probably most people hadn't accumulated 8 kilometers of running in one go. Yeah. And so what we identified was that for us to excel at Hyrox, not only perform well, but also to finish Hyrox being injury free and being able to transition back into life, which is important, we probably need to put a bigger emphasis onto running. Now, I will just say there's probably lots of other people who have come from running backgrounds who decided to come into Hyrox and probably are looking at the other elements of Hyrox and thinking that's where I might potentially get bottlenecks. So for those people, they may be doing more strength work, more skill work on those implements, developing strength, so on and so forth. So we basically mapped out, I think it was a 10-week training cycle. Was it 8 weeks?
No, I think it was
about 10 weeks.
10 weeks, 10 weeks.
So about 10 weeks out from the competition, and we're now about halfway through that, just over. We mapped out what that training would look like and how we would progress towards race day. So what we said was that we were going to do one session a week on a Saturday, and the other days in the week, everyone would just do their own normal training, which was a mixture of strength and conditioning work anyway, which is kind of a very nice supplement to Hyrox. And then we would program one additional accessory session that people could do if they wanted to get a bit more running volume in, or kind of more specific touches on the implements of Hyrox. So in a nutshell, we'll break it down. When we started really by just doing running work, and the goal was to accumulate up to 8 kilometers or 60 minutes of running.
It was just to get like exposure to running, because like we said, like our community just hadn't had that exposure of just running 8K. So I think the first step for us, like you're saying, was just trying to give people as much exposure to running as possible.
And to know that you can run 8 kilometers without stopping gives you a lot of confidence going into a Hyrox race. So I think we did 3 weeks of just running work. And then we started to add some body weight movement to the running. So that moved into like a running interval combined with burpee broad jumps, walking lunges, and air squats. So it's kind of components of Hyrox, but all unloaded. So that was our first introduction into, I guess, what we would call mixed Hyrox training. We did that for 2 weeks, I believe.
2 weeks at the track, and then we brought ourselves back into the gym here at Coastal.
So we've just done our second session at Coastal. Now we're entering week 6, I believe, this week. And we are now doing basically renditions of Hyrox. So now we're basically doing 800 to 1,000 meter running intervals, and then going into the actual station, whatever it is, in the order as much as possible, trying to actually follow the order. But we are doing between 50 to 75% of the actual volume of the race. And we're going to stick there for a few weeks. So people are starting to now apply the pacing awareness they developed with their running work into Hyrox, because it's very different doing 8 kilometers of continual running to doing 1K run, wall balls, 1K run, push a sled, 1K run, farmer's carry. So it really affects your pace. So right now it's all about people building awareness with and running
confidence,
pace,
essentially,
and confidence, and actually executing it, and what kind of paces they're going to hold. Because I know with Hyrox, it's such a big part of this is about pacing. People will get it so wrong, and I know that. And I just don't want to be one of those people.
That'll be me probably.
I'm sure we'll all get it on first experience. So what we're going to do now over the next few weeks is continue with what we're doing, but just build the volume a little bit more each week. And I think the closest we want to get to completing a Hyrox would probably be around like 75-80% of a full Hyrox. And once we've achieved that, we're then going to start to deload a little bit. So we'll start to pull back the volume, and probably 1 to 2 weeks out, we'll start our taper, and then going in and hit the competition.
And crush it.
How are you feeling with the Hyrox stuff, the training?
I'm feeling really good. Like, for me, it was definitely going to be all about the running. Like, it's a long event. Like we were talking about, like average person is finishing right around that 90-minute mark. That's 1 hour and a half of continuous work. So for me, that was always going to be my biggest challenge. In terms of like the mixed elements, like the farmer's carries, the sled push, it's like I'm kind of confident there. But if I turn up to that sled push and I'm so out of breath from my running, well, that's not going to help either. So for me, it was just all about, it was just trying to accumulate as much volume as possible in the running, which I've achieved. And past couple of weeks, like I've been saying to you, I've been feeling really good, just because we spent a good 3-4 weeks of just accumulating so much volume of the run. It built my confidence. It gave me pace, like awareness around my pacing. So we done the rendition last Saturday, which essentially was like 75% of the race. And I got to the end and I was pretty tired, but knowing that I only had like an extra 20 or 30 minutes of work, I left the floor feeling more confident, Because I now know in my head, right, well, I've kind of done 75%. I can do the rest, right?
Yeah, I'm feeling really good with it as well. I'm loving doing longer running work, having not done it for years. Like when I did my first run 6 weeks ago, I said, okay, I just want to get out and see if I can actually run 8K. I actually stopped at the 6K mark because I just went way too fast. And took me a good couple of weeks to like find my pacing again with running, because I haven't done 8 to 10 kilometers of continuous running, honestly, in like, I feel like 10 years. That used to be a staple at rugby cemetery. We'd accumulate 10 kilometers in a night, 2 to 3 times a week. So I've really enjoyed the process of getting back to it. And now getting into like the Hyrox renditions of it, which I was a little bit worried about how my body would actually handle it, the movement and the volume. Been feeling really good. And it's just fun to prep for a competition that's not been the CrossFit Open, which is kind of all I've done the last 8 years. So I'm really excited.
I also feel like, I mean, I've been saying to everyone in the gym, like I actually feel just really fit. Like I think like, I know I've mentioned this in the podcast before, but when we're running fit, you just feel so good. Me personally, I just feel really good in my body. In terms of like recovery, first couple of weeks I was like, my recovery was lagging. Like I could feel my hips, my ankles, my calves. I was like, but now we're on like week 6. Like we done that, like this rendition on Saturday. By Monday I was back on like my lower body session. Was like a couple of weeks ago. I had to skip the lower body session or move my week around to fit in Hyrox. But this week I was fine, so obviously recovery is getting better, which is a great.
I definitely do feel that my lower body strength has dampened a little bit, but my joints and tissues feel good. Most importantly,
I think
I'm not expecting to. But
we're not
stronger.
trying to push right now. Like heavy loads, right? We're just maintaining.
Yeah, I've kind of put my strength work into maintenance mode for now, and I'm actually doing a second session on Tuesday, which is when we normally do aerobic work anyway. And I'm actually just focusing a little bit more on trying to get 2 runs in a week, because I know for me, I just need to get the running in.
Nice,
cool, good question.
Great question.
All right, love this question.
Mr.
Sam Craig from Bali. He asked, what age did you actually start thinking about mental health and how it affected you day to day?
Can I kick this off?
Yeah, please.
I think for me, like I mentioned at the start of this podcast, like growing up, mental health was kind of something that you just didn't talk about. Like it was kind of taboo. There was a stigma attached to it. It was like, you're talking about mental health, there must be something wrong with this person. But I think now where I'm at in my stage of my life, where I've now understand what it is, I've become more aware, and I've got a much more better relationship with it. Like growing up, when someone keeps talking, like you relate something negative to it, that obviously stayed with me for quite a long time, right?
What do you mean by aware?
I mean more aware because there's obviously a lot more conversation around mental health now. So in terms of, like, I now know that it doesn't mean something bad.
Okay, awareness around the words mental health and what it actually means.
Yes, correct.
Gotcha.
So it's like now I'm at a stage where I'm confident in speaking about my own mental health to other people. Like I've now got a space where I feel seen and I feel heard and I feel listened to, right? So I've got this space where I can be vulnerable, I can share my stories, but I can also listen to other people. So it was basically in the past couple of years that I've really started to be more open about my own mental health. And that's obviously helped me connect with a lot more other people, if that makes sense.
What was the trigger to make you start thinking about your mental health more?
I think it was just being in an environment where more people were talking about it. Like it was okay to talk about it. It's not taboo, right? There's no stigma attached. We're just talking about the health of your mind, right? We're talking about your struggles, your hardships, like where you grow, etc.
I feel like in the time that I've known you, how long have you been here for now?
Like 2 years.
Yeah, I've seen so much growth in like your willingness and ability to share your thoughts and feelings, and as well like the language that you have around those quite complex subjects that a lot of people find really hard to take a thought that's going on in their head and actually put it into words that's understandable. And I think it's something that I've really seen loads of growth in.
And that's just due to the fact that I'm surrounded by like-minded people that are doing that. So they're leading the charge, like yourself. You're vulnerable, you're open. So that for me means it's okay for me to be also vulnerable and open, right?
Yeah, that safe space is so important. For me, it was I've talked about this moment many times on the podcast, but it was 2000 and I believe it was 2016. We were in the old gym, and I basically had a meltdown with my team, and the meltdown was something that would happen periodically, probably every 3 months, because I grew up my entire life suppressing my feelings, never sitting with my thoughts and trying to understand them. Life was all about grit your teeth, put on a brave face, and just get on with it. And so when you're doing that and you're sweeping your problems and your issues under the rug, they are going to rear their ugly head from time to time.
Mm.
And there's only so much we can handle. And I kind of had these periodic breaking points throughout the year. And I had like an epic one in a team meeting, you know, when I was just looking around my team. And it was obviously the boiling point of me feeling very frustrated with the people around me, but not having the conversations with them, feeling overwhelmed with work, but not doing anything about it, feeling trapped with my career and my relationships, but not trying to understand why those were happening. And I had this melting point, and I basically was recommended to read a book. And I read this book, and that was the first time I had ever read or seen that there was another way to do life. You know, it was like I was at a point in my life then when I was about, 26, I'd say. I just thought I had a very fixed mindset that this is the way I am. This is
that's it.
This is how I was brought into the world, and I've just got to do the best with what I can. And I can't change it. And reading a book which spoke to me on every single page made me realize that actually this isn't how I have to be. There is another way to be, and if I challenge myself and accept that I can change all of this. And the moment I started reading books, and I went through, 3 to 4 years of like, I read all the time, non-stop, every self-help book you could possibly think of. And I needed it, to be honest. You know, when people say like, is it necessary to read self-help books? I'm like, I needed it because I just hadn't been exposed to those concepts and those ideas, and I hadn't allowed myself to hear that there was another way to be. So books was a chance for me to start thinking about this kind of stuff. And I'd say from that day onwards, after reading that first book, I just developed a really deep interest in self-exploration, because essentially my journey then was about challenging myself and realizing there was parts of me that I didn't like, and that I was making life really hard for myself by being the way that I was, and like the thirst for more knowledge on the subject of mindset and self-growth, whatever you want to call it, was like insatiable, because I'm like, there was so much out there that I just hadn't been exposed to. So I'd probably say about 26 was when I really started to think about it. And I honestly think it's something I think about every minute of every day now.
What can I ask what the first book was?
Yeah, the book was a book on leadership, interestingly, called The Advantage. No one talks about it. I've never read it ever since, but it was just the first book. I guess it wasn't even really a self-help book because it was very directed towards being a leader of an organization. But there was many concepts about, it was basically saying to be a better leader, it starts with you. And it challenged me on concepts like, do you feel frustrated when this happens? Do you do this in a team meeting? And I was like, yes, holy shit, that's me. What do I do about it? And it was like, you turn the next page, like, here's another way to think about it.
Interesting. Do you think that, did someone recommend the book or you? Okay. Because what generally happens is that people are, when they're reading so much, it's like they're looking for something. Do you feel like you were in that boat where you were constantly trying to read something to find an answer to what was going on in your head? I
think as my self-exploration journey evolved, I started to look for certain things that I needed. Like I can remember vividly, like communication at one point in my life being, on this journey somewhere, being something I felt like I was struggling with. And what was making me think that I was struggling with communication was that my team was growing. I had a real mixture of personalities, and I was finding that with certain personalities I could vibe very nicely with and have great conversations and relationships, and there was others that I couldn't. And I had seen people be very malleable and flexible where they could communicate with loads of different people, and I wanted that. And I was like, I need that. I'm in a people organization, not only with my team, but the people I serve. And it should be within my interest. I want to be able to build a relationship with everyone. Doesn't mean I want to be friends with everyone, but I want to be able to at least give every person the opportunity to have some form of relationship. And that's when I stumbled across nonviolent communication. And I looked for that. Or so I heard it on a podcast, and I'm like, that's what I need right now. And then you kind of like, you're just going out. The happiness hypothesis might be the next one. Like extreme ownership. There were points in my life where I came across a book and it just spoke to me at that point in time. Maybe it was a title, maybe it was a blurb, maybe I heard someone talking about a podcast or a TED talk where it was like, I think I need that in my life right now. And I mean, like, there's a great quote that you told me, it sticks with me forever. Like, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
That's a great quote.
There are books that have come across 10 years ago that just didn't resonate with me, and now I'll come across and I'm like, I need that in my life right now. Yeah, for sure. I think where I'm at with all the self-help stuff now is actually I tend to there aren't really any books that I want to read anymore. Not to say that I won't learn anything, but you know, every book has something that's valid, and I always take away something from every book. I think now I feel like I've acquired a lot of information, been exposed to lots of different concepts, and now I just want to be more, and I just want to experiment and try and experience and come up with my own things that I believe in, and I'm starting, you know, I'm seeing now that like there is no right or wrong. Everything can work. There is a good and a bad to every single thing that you read out there. So now I'm a little bit more skeptical when I read like this is the way that things should be done. And you know, when I think back to my journey, like there were times where I'd read a book and I'd be like, guys, you're doing it wrong.
We're changing
this
everything.
Is how things should be done, because a book just told me that's how it should be done.
Yeah, I think especially as a leader, like you need to invest time in that sort of stuff. Like you need to develop yourself like emotionally. Like if you want to, like, we talk about like Simon Sinek's and all these people, they talk about it all the time. Like if you want to grow as a leader, you have to grow emotionally, right? Because you have to be able to connect with people to be able to lead someone essentially, right? I think it is very interesting that in your stage where you call it the universe, call it fate, call it whatever it is, you do get signs and something will appear in your life, and maybe it's just not the right time to read that book or listen to that podcast, but always take a second to reflect on what is that? Do I need that right now?
I think a lot of people just aren't even aware that signs are a thing. Do you know what I mean?
No, yeah.
You've got to be in a place where you're looking for something, to be open to receiving something, whether it's a clue, whether it's a sign, whether it's a signal, whether it's fate, whether it's karma. I was just sleepwalking through life where I didn't take any of that account for any of that. I didn't recognize, didn't want to see any of those kind of things. I didn't believe in it because it's like, this is me, this is who I am. You're never going to change it.
Yeah, I think similar to me, like now that I'm reflecting back on that question, like you had like an exact event. I probably had an exact event as well. It was like when I was getting together with like my current wife and we went through quite a lot of hardships and stuff. That was a big pivotal moment in my life where I had to start searching other ways of doing things, because I was essentially just self-destructing myself. So there had to be another way. And for me, it's never really been about books. Like I do like to listen, but it's more about like podcasts and people that I look up to, like what are they doing? What are they doing different? And essentially just learning from them. But
so I think that's why we're spending ages on this question, but it's such a good question. But it's like, I love podcasts now, and I love audiobooks, and I love just like hearing stories. And but I think fundamentally what I needed was like the base level understanding of all of this. It was like the stories didn't resonate with me because I didn't know what they were talking about or the concepts behind it. Now I feel like I can listen to most stories and and I'm like, you know, I can even pull out maybe even like the science behind what's happening there and why they're feeling that way, and almost kind of preempt what's going to happen in a podcast because I've been exposed to it. And I remember like that foundational book I read all those years ago that talked about this concept. So I'm very grateful for going down that geeky route all those years ago and developing a good understanding of it. And I think that's really helped, you know, have that foundation. And it's helped me like massively. It's helped in my job. And building relationships with people, like people that I coach. That's so valuable.
Super valuable.
Nice. Okay.
Question number 3.
Question number 3. Holy shit. How long has it been? An hour, Johnny?
Nah.
23 minutes. Okay,
we got it.
Okay, question 3. The importance of cooldowns.
I think they're extremely important. Why? Because, I mean, again, there's no right or wrong. It just depends on who the person is.
Why do you cool down?
Why would I cool down? Because we do hard stuff in the gym, right? And I think it's important when you do something hard, you've got to bridge yourself before going into the next hard thing, right? We're doing something maybe physically draining in the gym, also mentally, but I then need to turn up to my job and I need to be mentally present. So for me personally, there has to be a bridge. Like I can't go from fight or flight state into trying to be mentally present, but I'm still in a fight or flight state. For me, that cool down's important. Yeah,
the way I think about it, Joe Dispenza puts it really nicely. When you think about the animal kingdom, when the lion chases the gazelle, the gazelle goes into fight or flight mode and it sprints away for its life. When the gazelle feels like it's out of danger, it then settles down, waits about 5 minutes, and it starts eating grass again. So the gazelle has an ability to get back to what we call homeostasis very, very quickly. And then it's ready that if a lion does come back for it again, it's ready to fight or flight again and go for the next race away, run away for its life. What we do really badly as humans is that we don't give ourselves that 5 minutes to stop and eat the grass. And what ends up happening is that we go from waking up to sleeping, we're on the run non-stop the whole day. And chronically over time, this is going to lead to all sorts of issues with cortisol and essentially disease long term. And so what I like to think about cool downs is that it's an opportunity, like you said, it's a bridge, or it's a way to break up stress in my day. Because in the context of my training is that when I finish training, it's about 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and probably in the next 30 minutes to 45 minutes, I've got the next thing in my day that I need to get to, whether it's a meeting, whether it's a client, whether it's sitting down in front of a piece of
eating
computer,
food,
whether it's eating food. Exactly. So a cool down for me is an important part to allow me to come back into that rest and digest homeostasis state. So then I'm ready to go to the next one. Because if I don't do it and I skip it, and I'll be honest, I sometimes do skip it.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
I would say like half the week I skip the cool down.
And I do notice when I have like a consecutive couple of days where I've been neglecting that cool down, I get to the end of the day and I'm trashed.
Dead, yeah. I totally feel that as well. But in terms of, so I think we should talk about the concept of cooling down, because like cooling down, if you go on the internet, will tell you like stretch, you know, sit on a bike for 10 minutes, maybe do some breathing exercises. I think it can look 1,000 different ways.
Great.
For me, my cool down is genuinely grab my protein shake, walk out the gym, get in the sunshine,
take a walk,
have a little walk, or even just sit on a pile of dog piss on the AstroTurf outside in the park. That for me, in the sunshine, that for me is my cooling down.
Yeah.
Before I come back into the gym, get the rest of my day. I know you actually like to do about a couple minutes of stretching.
Yeah, I'll generally do some stretching, and then very similar to you, I'll grab my shake and I'll try and go for a walk if I've not got a client. But I mean, if you're living in like a really cold country and unfortunately you can't go sitting out in the sun, even if it's just hopping on the bike or it's stretching or it's something, it's just giving yourself that couple of minutes to just calm down.
The thing is, for me, why I don't like doing a stretch after my workout is because if I stretch in the gym, it's actually the music and the environment. That's what gets me really jacked up. So although the intention is
the decibels,
that's
what it is.
It's not, the intention is great for me to sit and stretch, but I'm actually not fully relaxing
yourself out.
Yeah, because like the music's still pumping, people are still screaming and shouting around me, weights are being dropped, and it's in an environment where I'm used to
We're
stress.
still jacked up, right?
Yeah, that's just where I've been doing hard things for the last hour. So I need the separation environment to allow my body to actually calm down. So sometimes when I'll stretch, I'll actually finish the stretch and not feel cooled down at all, versus actually just walking outside, not stretching. I feel a lot more relaxed.
Nice.
So in a nutshell,
yes,
use it as a way to break up your day. Yeah. I'll be honest, when I'm on holiday and I've got nothing to do after training, I didn't need to cool down because like life would cool me down.
Agreed.
Just as I would go to the next thing. Cool. Is it necessary, Liam, to train power?
Train power.
Yeah.
Do you want to kick things off?
I'll happily kick things off.
Let's go.
Just depends. I mean,
the classic answer.
The classic. Now, but I'll give you more than that.
We'll
if you are an athlete who competes in a sport where power is important, then 100% you need to train power. It's a law of specificity. So if we talk about a CrossFit athlete, do you need power? I mean, if you want to move objects fast and explosively, or move yourself fast and explosively, which you have to do regularly in the sport of CrossFit, then it should be with your interest to train it. Now, in terms of who should be training power, that's a whole conversation in itself, because we have to respect the strength continuum. To train power, remember, power is strength times speed. So we need a foundational level of strength in order to express power.
Yep.
So if you're a weak individual and haven't done much strength training, and you're doing power-based exercises like plyometrics and jumping, thinking you're going to get more powerful, you probably won't.
You probably won't, yeah.
Because what you actually need to do, you just need to do more strength training. And just by doing strength training alone without power work, you will get more powerful.
Yeah.
So a bit of a side tangent there. In terms of the question, do we need to train power for everyday life and for general health? I'm not sure you do. And I think it comes down to your opportunities for training.
Yeah.
So if I have a general health client who is training 4 days a week, consecutively over a 10-year period. Well, I've got ample opportunities to make a whole bunch of different training adaptations. And we know that the adaptations are going to be faster with this individual because they've got so much frequency. Means that I can afford to spend times in my year where I would probably touch on power training, if it's appropriate to the client, of course, in terms of their development. Because I think developing power also develops some really good inroads with regards to like the nervous system, increases like the density of the muscle tissues, which can help with like long-term development of hypertrophy and injury prevention. Also like training tendons and ligaments, like that kind of work is actually really important. So I do think it serves a purpose for longevity. But if I also have someone who's training once or twice a week, I'm probably not going to put my time towards developing power because I don't think it's as important as training things like strength, endurance, absolute strength, and hypertrophy. In a nutshell, that's my thoughts. What are your thoughts?
I think obviously very similar to you. I would always just go back to like, what's the goal, right? What's the goal? Who's the individual? If the individual and the goal is that they want to do CrossFit or they want to like be in a sport where there has to be power, well, of course you have to train it. Now, going back to the question, if it's just for general health, I'm probably going to say there's not much need to train it, right? You're going to get a lot more bang for your buck focusing on good resistance training, i.e. absolute strength, endurance, hypertrophy, coupled with aerobic work. That's what's probably going to push the needle forward and going to keep you healthy for the next 40 years. Now, if you're an individual that's maybe intermediate trainee, right, you've got a good couple of years under your belt of strength training and you're still training for general health, but you've kind of got like an interest of training power or strength, speed, or whatever it is, then yeah, why not? We can have that conversation. But is it a must for general health? Probably not.
Agreed. Both agreed. Good question though. Next question. What does mental health actually mean and what do you do for your mental health?
Yeah, I'll start.
Please.
I think...
Well, answer the first part of the question. What does mental health actually mean?
For me, mental health means that essentially you are training your mind, right? How do we train the mind? Well, there's multiple ways of doing it. We've got to challenge ourselves like cognitively, right? That's training the mind, just the same as you would take your body to the gym. We've got to do the same with our mind. What does that look like? There's multiple things. It can look like meditation. It can look like having really good connections with other people. Right, like we talked about before, it's about being vulnerable, being open, etc. That's what it means to me.
It's a pretty hard one to define.
It's really hard.
Genuinely, I always do find it really hard to define, and I've like spent many years like trying to Google what is the actual definition of mental health. I guess like in simple terms, I'm trying to make this as unscientific. Not that I even have a scientific answer, but it's like, okay, we all know what physical health is. Generally speaking, physical health is like we're doing things to improve the physical health of our body.
And we've got loads of markers for that, right?
You know, it's like good nutrition, it's getting enough sleep, it's going to the gym, it's going on a run, it's like exercising your body and keeping it active.
But that's also mental health as well, right?
But then I think, then when I think about mental health, it's just the health of the mind, right? In simple terms. And like, what does a healthy mind look like versus what does a non-healthy mind look like? Well, I think there's so many things that go into that. So I guess when I think about mental health as a spectrum, right? And I guess like just like in physical health, there's a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, mental health, you've got maybe like diseases and disorders. And on the other end of the spectrum, you've got a healthy, happy, positive mind that has an ability to navigate the challenges of life. And then, we all sit somewhere between on that spectrum. And then it's like, what can you do about your mental health? Well, like there are things that we can do to move us towards this end of the spectrum, which I think will generally contribute to a lot more happiness and fulfillment and longevity.
I think also people would talk about it as like you've got like they call it like the deep health, right, which is like your physical health. Then it's like your relational health. No, that's probably not. It's just like it's like your relational, and then you've got like the other end, which is like your social connections, and like that's sort of what they would deem. I know Precision Nutrition talk about it all the time. That's kind of what they deem as like deep health. It's like your physical health, and then it's like your health of the mind, which is like your relationships, your social connections. That's all love, to do love, etc. But it is an extremely hard question to define exactly what it is, because I think it kind of means something different to everybody. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Well, then I think next part of the question was like, what do you do for your own mental health? I think the first thing that I did to really help my mental health was like reading books, like we just talked about at the start of this conversation, was like starting to cultivate some understanding of what I was experiencing in my mind.
Yeah.
And the experiences I was thinking were things around like my identity, my past, my feelings.
Yeah, your
that
fears.
Can be, my fears. And feelings can be past and present. Just thoughts.
Yeah.
And it was just all of it. I think, the journey of starting to read and understand it was just about listen, like at an elementary level was just recognizing that there was something happening between my head and between my ears, sorry. And, you've got a choice. You can do something about it. And at first I didn't know what I could do about it. That's why I love journaling. Journaling is probably a mental health practice because it allows me to get my thoughts out of my head and put them onto a piece of paper. And just that process allows me to understand the thoughts even better. Vulnerability and like being okay talking about and sharing my struggles, my fears, the things that I'm thinking about with anyone. And I'm like, my biggest challenge for me has been like, I would love for my social media platform to be somewhere where I could be fully vulnerable. And I'm almost there. I think there are still probably some things that I don't fully share. I couldn't even tell you what those things are, but my relationship with that has evolved so much in the last few years. This podcast, like I genuinely come to this podcast not being afraid to share almost anything. And I mean, some of the shit that I share in our team meetings, everyone's like, whoa, should not be sharing that shit. But I'm like,
too much information.
That's kind of, but I mean, just the process of sharing is nice because it's like, I'm not leaving anything unturned in my own head. What else? Meditation for me actually just gives me quiet. And the quiet, like we talked about with the cool down, giving breaks in the day gives me a chance to think a bit more clearly because my head's not such a scramble thinking about work and training and life. Having a bit of 10 to 15, 20 minutes of quiet, I just have a lot more clarity on my thoughts. It's a little bit less confusing when I look inwards and I'm like, I can now pick out themes and see things and things make a bit more sense. Like nature, movement, two things massively help my mental health. And sometimes I do movement with the intention of helping me mentally more so than physically, which is a massive shift in mindset because movement for me was always about the physical in the past. And now it's actually like, doing a hard training session would actually be worse for my mental health right now. And I actually just need to just go on a stroll by the seaside, dip my feet in the water, take my shoes off.
But that comes from experience as well, right? You've got to have lived what it feels like to do the hard gym session or the movement trying to get a different outcome, and it didn't really end quite well, right?
Days off from work.
Boundaries.
Like honestly, like, I haven't done this since I said it, but the goal was to have 2 days out of the gym at one, but I have one day where I'm not coaching in the gym and it's just sitting in front of a computer and coming doing training session. That has helped me massively. Having one full day of the week where I don't do any work, which I also struggle with and I fail at quite a lot, but that's the intention. Also helps a lot. Catching up with friends, spending time with good people. That's why I'm so grateful that in this job, in our company, that like I'm genuinely surrounded by my really good friends who I can talk to about anything. Like that's so unique and so rare, and such a privilege for me to have that. And I'm very lucky and very blessed to have that.
I think also for me, it's trying to understand what makes me feel good, right? So we go back to that concept of like filling your cup, right? It's like because also when I think of mental health, I think of essentially like stress management. Like we need to have tools in place to help develop the mind and look after it, right? So that's what we're thinking about, like journaling, meditating, but also what fills my cup is like connection. It's like going out to see friends. It's like spending a Sunday going out for some food, spending our time on the water, going out with my wife Petra, going out for some food. So it's just like trying to understand I've got all these things like walking in nature, movement, coming to the gym. These are all sunshine. These are all things that I use to help manage my mental health, right? It's like stuff that's going to fill my cup and make me feel good. That's what I would do.
Oh, going on a holiday.
Yeah,
I just can't, and that was, those 2 weeks were essential at like recharging me fully, and I needed it.
I'm going on holiday soon.
You're going on holiday soon as well.
Yay!
Yes, lad. Awesome, good question. Okay, Hey, John, what's our time at? 39.
Oh, we got this.
Okay, we're going to go to the next one. What are your thoughts on high-intensity interval training?
Oh, I think this could be a podcast on its own, but short and sweet. I think there's a time and place for it.
When is that?
It's a very hard question for me to answer, but I think that that people can deem that as success, high intensity training, and it can work for certain individuals, but where it doesn't work for individuals, for example, for general health, it's like that person's probably already stressed throughout their day, and they're coming into a place, essentially we're looking for guidance and knowledge and expertise from coaches. And if we're giving them another intense training session, we know that two stressors or a stressor on top of a stressor is not going to end well. That's my view on it.
Yeah, nice. I'll jump in there. I think that
it's hard.
Yeah, no. So I've got so many thoughts that I'm trying to condense it. Yeah. I think the definition of high intensity interval training, let's be honest, is pretty much doing conditioning work. Yeah. Minimal rest periods. Fast cadence. That's essentially what we really mean by HIIT. Yeah. Right. So I think there are times where HIIT could be actually amazing for someone. The person, you got two options: sit in your ass and do nothing versus do a HIIT class. I'm gonna always push that person towards a HIIT class. It's getting you up and it's getting you moving. I think where we're falling short with HIIT training is a longevity and the sustainability piece. When I think about general health, and we talked about this yesterday as a team, if we're trying to set someone up for general health, like there has to be, when we think about training, I think two things are important here. Build an aerobic system, because life is aerobic. We are functioning aerobically from the moment we wake up to the moment we sleep. Yep. And resistance training. Like resistance training is giving people the capability to move, to squat, to hinge, to lunge, to walk upstairs, to pick up their child, to bulletproof themselves against injury, to build bone density. So I want to see in a training program both of those elements combined. Yep. And I think that's where HIIT is falling short. And instead what we're generally doing is doing a lot of conditioning work. And I know sometimes you'll be doing weight training in a HIIT class, but it's not really weight training. It's like the loads are so light that the intensity has to be so low that it actually just turns into cardio work. Yeah. So that's important distinction. I know you're still doing a squat and a deadlift, but it's actually still aerobic training. And I think what ends up happening for people who are just doing HIIT training all the time is that they run out of abilities to progress. They're producing so much stress because, generally speaking, high intensity aerobic training is very stressful on the body. And again, when you put that into context of most of our lives, we're already stressed as hell anyway. We just wind up at a point where we get injured and we get burnt out, and we essentially are shaving years off our life by doing it. So it comes back to the goals of the individual. Like high intensity interval training doesn't resonate with me on most levels, if I'm honest. I would love to see a more well thought out program that's balancing strength and conditioning work, and the conditioning work has to be appropriate to the people who do it. And for most people who are doing HIIT training, who have lower training ages, who are a little bit newer to it, who are less strong, those people need slower contractions. They need to not be doing a whole bunch of plyometrics like box jumps and burpees and jumping jacks, and we need to be doing more controlled contractions and still doing conditioning work, but that can be done in more intelligent ways, like jumping on ergs or machines which are low, have low contractile, lower eccentric contractions, and are much easier on the body and a much better way to actually train the aerobic system. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think it also I think the whole prescription of high intensity training kind of got lost with general health. It's like people have got good intentions, but like you said, if that person's not strong enough, if that person's not developed the awareness or motor control of those movement patterns, and they're trying to do them at a high output cyclical effort or like turning fast turnover, they're not actually getting that dose response. So what it turns into is just a sweat fest for 30 minutes, and essentially that's not really getting the person closer towards their goals, right? Yeah.
And I totally understand why people love it. It's accessible, it's easy to get to, anyone can do it. It feels good because it feels like you've done hard work. But I'll also say it's not surprising that so many people gravitate towards it, because when you're in a cycle of stress, you become addicted to that feeling of stress. And so you get addicted to creating that feeling that you feel after a 10-hour work day or a very stressful meeting. You want to try and create that in the gym as well, because we think that's good for us. And it's very hard to break out of that cycle for a lot of people. And for most people, they will stay in the HIIT, high intensity training world for probably a number of years until they just can't handle it anymore. And that's usually where people look for that next option. How can I make this more sustainable?
Nice.
Cool. Quick name drop. This is what we're trying to do right now at Coastal.
Yes.
We are building the TFL Train for Life program.
Yeah.
It's a 45-minute program. So it's speaking to the people who don't want to do an assessment. They just want to jump in and do a class. They want to have fun. They want to be in a high energy environment. They want to have coaching. I want to be around like-minded people. But we're prescribing it in a way where there is a blend of strength and conditioning work, and the selection of exercises is appropriate to the general people who attend our classes. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great drop there.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Next question. Would love to know your thoughts about worrying about things you cannot control. So this is the very popular saying of control what's within your control and let go of what's not. How do you do it? Can I start?
Please.
So, when I first received this question, I thought it was a really good question,
Mm-hmm.
and I started thinking about what I do when I'm faced with an obstacle or a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I had on my holiday just recently, got COVID before my flight, had a whole week long of so many different challenges. And, my girlfriend, Cami, tended to struggle with letting go of what wasn't in her control and just focusing on what's in her control. Whereas I had an ability to very quickly discern the difference between what's in my control and what's not, and what can I actually focus on. But I would say that when I started learning about this concept of letting go of what's not in your control, it resonated with me straight away. I understood the concept of it. But when I started to become faced with obstacles, it wasn't instantaneous as to how quickly I would know what's in my control. Does that make sense? So
Totally.
I'd have to sit there, like genuinely sometimes for minutes, and be like, okay, this has happened. What's actually in my control and what's not? And there'd sometimes be a debate and a back and forth debate in my head to be like, is that in your control or is that not in your control? And then at some point I could then, once I've established what's in and what's out, to then think, okay, well, what can I actually do about this situation? And when I first got exposed, I think Ben Bergeron actually started talking about it. He's the one who first made me start thinking about it. And then I think Stoic philosophy, when I started reading about that kind of stuff, really got me to think about it even more. But at first it wasn't easy.
No, it's not easy.
It was something that took a lot of effort. And even still now, when I am faced with obstacles and challenges, I would say that the time it takes me from being presented with a challenge to then being able to create a solution and a strategy to move forward is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. But there is still a process of just, I need some quiet and some time to actually think about this. And it's something I think about a lot. Yeah. I would say like numerous times within every single day of my life, I'm presented with a choice or a challenge. And I have to think and ask myself what's in my control and what's not. Let go of what's not. And I think a really important part to that is once you can, because the question is asking how do you let go of what's not in your control? That's a very important first step. The second part to this is that you have to then identify what is within your control, because then you have power. All right. And when you're just focusing on letting go what's not in your control, you're still powerless because you still don't have anything that you can do to get yourself out of it or move yourself forward. So the part 2 of this is recognize what's in your control. Okay, now what do I do with that? Now what's the strategy? What's the game plan?
Yeah, I think for me, you hit the nail on the head when you said you have to give yourself some time and space. And I think when I'm faced with challenges and adversities, what I'll generally do is I'll take, if I've got the luxury, I'll take maybe a couple of days, right? Depends what the adversity is or the challenge. The bigger the challenge, the more time I need to sit and reflect and just actually decide and understand like what is actually in my control, what can I do right now, and what can I not do. And I think the key point is to all is giving yourself that space to reflect, because what you'll see with most people is that they don't actually give themselves that space. They make they're faced with the challenge, they make a decision right there and then.
A reaction,
right? They don't take the time to actually sit down and reflect, and I think that's where a lot of people get themselves into a bit of trouble, because they've not took the time to actually sit down, like with other people, depends on the challenge. But for me, generally, it's just on my own and just sitting with my own thoughts.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think going back to like most of the people in the world who are faced with challenging decisions and having to think about what's in their control and what's not, when you're not giving most of those people who don't give themselves the time are also very busy, very stressed people.
Yeah.
And when you're in that state of stress or busyness, you just don't have
the capacity
to make rational decisions. Because the emotional brain is just on fast forward.
Yeah, it's on overdrive.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Time and space. Love it. And, you know, to not expect that this is something you're going to get straight away. And you probably never will get to a point where this is something instantaneous, automatic reaction.
Nice.
Okay. What are some of the main considerations around training women?
Training women?
Yep.
I think that what we will talk about is generally, I mean, we go back to like different rep schemes and stuff. I think that from my personal experience, that women tend to make more adaptations just on maybe slightly higher rep ranges. Right, when we are testing maybe like absolute strength, like for example, a protocol would be if we were testing like a heavy 1 for a guy, we're probably not going to test a heavy 1 for a chick. We'll probably go like a 2 or a 3, just because we know that the chick or the female's, it's going to be harder for her to fire up that central nervous system. She just doesn't have that absolute strength capacity built into her actual human being, right? Yeah,
totally. Yeah, I think that's a massive one. In the same way that we would often look at like individuals or men with lower training ages.
Yeah.
So that's something to consider. And I would generally consider that more when you're working with absolute strength protocols. If I was doing like hypertrophy and strength endurance protocols, I probably wouldn't be thinking too much or worrying too much about rep ranges. I would say obviously another very obvious part to this is their cycle.
Menstrual cycle, yeah.
And the menstrual cycle, I think the most important part here, and this is what I've learned, is when I first started learning about the menstrual cycle and the implications that it would have on training and what I need to know as a coach. I started to basically sync myself and my calendars with my clients' menstrual cycles and basically would make loads of adjustments to the program based on which phase of the cycle they're in. We actually done a whole podcast on this. So if you're interested in learning about this, go check out our podcast with Olivia Park, where we talk about the different considerations, what to think about. But actually, the biggest lesson that I've taken from this is the importance of empowering and educating your client on investing their own time and energy into learning about their cycle. It's such an important thing that I think women should be learning about anyway. Like, this is a part of your being and will be
for the rest
of your life. And if you can't understand what's physiologically happening in your body in different times of the week, it makes life really challenging. Because I know a lot of women who do start learning about their menstrual cycles, they have a lot of like aha moments and like weight gets lifted off their shoulders because they stop being so hard on themselves. They're like, I can recognize a theme now that every time at this part of the month, like everything feels heavy. I crave more food. I have no capacity in the gym. Like, I actually want to go for a walk instead of train. And what they do when they don't understand this, and they beat themselves up for telling themselves that they're lazy, they're pathetic, they're a wimp. They question their goals. When actually, like, these are all totally normal. So that's really the biggest thing for me, is like having a conversation with the client, educating them with whatever I know, or pointing in the right direction to seek the education and knowledge, and then making it a collaboration. And because the second most important thing is that every female is different. So, you know, there are kind of some golden rules around how a female should feel at different parts during different parts of their cycle, but it's not the same for everyone.
But it's not the case, and that's what I was going to say.
I've had complete polar opposites with clients, where some females should be, you know, at their most vulnerable, and they're actually like, this is when I hit all my PRs. Like, I want to do my hardest training now. So again, it all comes down to self-awareness and building an open relationship where you can communicate back and forth.
And I think that collaboration is super important, because you could have made the assumption when you're programming and periodizing, and I made that mistake. And you're essentially then you're not setting your client up for success, because you've assumed that this person is going to be at their most vulnerable, when actually just having a bit more conversation. And I know we probably say this every single time in the podcast, but that's the importance of checking in with your athletes and your individuals. We have those daily check-ins for a reason, is to pick up those trends. And instead of the coach just assuming that this female is going to be at the most vulnerable, right? You've made that assumption, you've been programming and stuff, and actually she's feeling the best. That could have been avoided if you just had better check-ins and maybe a bit more communication with your client, right?
Yeah. Actually, what I do most of the time now is I just remind my female clients all the time that you have the power to make a change to this session at any point in time. It doesn't even have to be linked to your cycle, but as most of them now, pretty much all of them actually, like when they know it's that time of the cycle,
they'll be already making the adjustments.
They just make those adjustments themselves, and that's totally cool. Great question.
Nice.
Okay, we have 2 more questions to go.
We got this.
Question number 9. Question 10 has like 6 questions in it, by the way. That's a quick fire round. Question 9. What's the difference between an athlete-centered approach as opposed to traditional coaching methods, and what challenges have you faced in your coaching career? Okay, I think we need to start by defining what do we mean by an athlete-centered approach as opposed to traditional coaching methods. Okay. An athlete-centered approach for me is where we have a plan for a training cycle, but we are making adjustments to the training cycle on a day-to-day or a week-to-week basis based upon the feedback that we're getting from our client. The traditional coaching method would be you map out a 4 to 6 week cycle in advance where the reps, loads, percentages, exercises are progressed linearly ahead of time, and it doesn't take into account what the individual's actually going through on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis.
Yes.
Anything to add?
No, that's about it.
Okay, challenges. So I would say that we pretty much program for our groups as well as our individuals using more of an athlete-centered approach. Where we create a rough plan, but then we are constantly monitoring the feedback of our group athletes and our individuals and making tweaks and adjustments to the plan as we go along.
Yes.
I would say we do it more with individual coaching. We probably do it a little bit less with group coaching because it's a lot harder. You've got lots of different people inputting data. I think the biggest challenges with an athlete-centered approach is it's a lot more time consuming. Yes. Number one, like you've got to be checking in daily, and checking in sometimes is not just looking at the results, but it's actually having conversations with that client. It's a lot easier to do
face-to-face
if you're doing face-to-face coaching. It's a lot harder to do if you're doing remote coaching. Another challenge I find with an athlete-centered approach, especially if you're doing remote coaching, is that you need to be working with a self-aware individual, someone who really actually knows when they're feeling good, when they're not feeling good. And I know that sounds really simple. Most people will say, of course I know when I'm feeling good, when I'm not. But you put an individual into a gym, which is like their hour or 2 in the gym of their day. They've paid for the program. They have expectations that they've set themselves. As soon as you get into a gym, people tend to lose touch with how they're actually feeling.
Music's on.
Exactly. Music's on, environment's
Caffeine's
on, everyone
hit.
Around them is lifting.
Like, let's go.
Exactly. So you need to be working with self-aware individuals. So generally speaking, that for me is a higher level individual with a higher training age. Is going to be someone I would use an athlete-centered approach. Someone who's newer, I would probably stick with more of a traditional coaching approach.
Just give them the time and space and opportunity to develop that awareness. And again, that's going back to your check-ins and stuff. I think it can be quite challenging. Like, time consuming is one, but it is given that or understanding if that individual is aware, and if they're just saying that they're not feeling good or they're saying that they're really feeling great, it's quite hard to understand if you're not seeing them face to face. I find with all my clients face to face, it's very easy. Client walks in the door, how you doing? Oh, not so great, didn't sleep so good, sweet, let's make a quick adjustment on the fly. But if you're doing that with that communication, there's a lag. There might be like a 12-hour difference, right? So you're not receiving that message until maybe the client's finished the session. There's just a lot more challenging in my opinion.
I think where we all sit with this now is that we would much rather invest the time and energy into helping someone develop high levels of self-awareness,
give them the tools,
and then giving them ownership to make changes when they need to. And that goes for all our group programs and all our individual clients, because essentially what that ends up being is an athlete-centered approach that's controlled by the athlete. And that's awesome. Like that is the sweet spot, because we've created autonomy, and we just end up being guides.
Nice.
You can take control of the process. Awesome. Okay, quick fire round. That will not be a quick fire round. Okay, Liam, you start first, and I will follow you. So the pressure's on you, to be honest.
So say yes or no.
Maybe
not.
yes.
Oh,
but then again,
there is pressure.
Maybe
then. Let's
no.
go.
Question 1. What type of cardio would you do for the rest of your life? You can only pick one.
One machine.
One. No, I didn't say machine.
Oh.
I said one type of cardio.
Cyclical.
Come on, mate. Be more specific.
I'd probably go.
Row?
No, you're talking about machines.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, I'd probably go ski erg and bike erg.
One. You can one.
Okay, I'll go.
Sorry, guys listening.
Bike erg.
Bike erg. I would go run.
Run is pretty good actually, but yeah.
Yeah, I go
I'm
run.
sticking with bike erg.
Okay, cool. Question 2. Protein bars, yes or no?
No.
You just ate a protein bar today and you ate one yesterday.
Yeah, and I told you how terrible they both were. Sam, that's why I was so definitive in my answer. It's definitely not.
Okay, I'm not really a protein bar guy. Although on holiday, lifesaver when you need to, I've been having like these natural protein bars, the most natural of the of the artificial bunch. But yeah, generally I'd say no. Real food for me.
Yeah.
What's the greatest investment you've ever made?
Probably understanding who I am as a person.
Oh, that's so good. No, I can't. I'm not allowed to copy you. The greatest investment I've ever made. Well, I would say honestly, like learning to explore my mind.
Beautiful.
Mental health. Nice. Next question. What book are you currently reading?
We are currently reading Changemakers.
Yeah, so I'm reading 2. I'm reading Changemakers. Yeah. That's my I always tend to have 2 on the go. One for learning, one for fiction. And I am reading, is it called The Reliquary? That sounds very wrong. The first book was called The Relic, which was pretty awesome. Yeah. And that's one of the books I read on holiday. I read 4 books on holiday, you know?
That's pretty good. Yeah,
so I read The Relic, and then this is part 2 to The Relic. I think it's called Reliquary, but I'm probably saying that completely wrong. Anyway.
And what's the second one? Changemakers as
well? No,
it's
right? Changemakers and The Reliquary. Sounds so wrong when I say that. Okay, next one. What is one thing that you cannot live without? I hate these questions so hard.
I'm looking at my phone. I'm going to say my phone probably.
What's one thing I can't live without? I want to be really annoying and be like, oxygen.
Water.
What is one thing I can't live without?
Come on, this is quick
fire.
I know.
I hate these questions. Are so hard for me. What is one thing I cannot live without?
Your new coffee machine. There you go.
Nah, I can live because I ran out of coffee today, so I didn't even have it, and I'm still here. One thing I can't live without. Other human beings.
I'll go fitness.
You said your phone.
Yeah, I took it back.
What the fuck? Okay, cool. One piece of advice for a younger you.
Younger me. Listen more.
Oh, that's good. That is really good. Fuck, I hate these questions. Listen more. Listen more is really good. Shit, this is why it's not. I'm sorry, everyone.
Yeah, this is great. We should have a timer here. Yeah.
No, because that adds more stress to me and makes it even slower. What's one piece of advice for a younger you? Do what you love because you want to do it, not because others don't want you to. That makes sense?
Do what you love.
Nah, I just made that up. No shit. If it feels good and you love it, do it.
Yes, there we go.
Yeah. Liam, that was good.
That was great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everyone, for writing in with your fantastic questions. We really, really appreciate it. We love these Q&As. And I just also wanted to say, after one of my most recent episodes talking about my 10 reflections from holiday, where I talked about how nice it was to connect with people who had said how the podcast or what we post on YouTube or Instagram had affected them in a positive way. Yep. And I'd said in that podcast, that it's something I really believe in, is making sure I reach out to people to tell them if I think they're doing good work and that I appreciate them. And I would just say I really appreciate everyone who's reached out to me since that podcast to say that they appreciate what we do in the podcast, what we share on social media, what we're doing with our training and our programs and the process programming. So thank you guys. It really, really does mean a lot. And I always do get back to everyone who writes to me. So it kind of makes me feel like I create a connection with this person I've never actually met before. So yeah, just wanted to say thank you.